بسم الله وعلى بركة الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح الأمة وجاهد في سبيل الله حق جهاده جزاه الله عنا أوفر الجزاء. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. It's a pleasure talking to you today about this important subject of ethics or medical ethics from the Islamic perspective. I would have liked to be with you in person, but circumstances prevented me from coming. Inshallah, I am with you in spirit, and at a future date, I'll be able to be with you physically. I would like to start by some definitions. What do you mean by the term ethics? Ethics means a discipline that is used to analyze issues to be able to tell whether they are right or wrong. In other words, whether they are moral or not moral. Bioethics is a branch of ethics that deals with telling right from wrong in the area of medicine and other health sciences. Ethics is part of the discipline of philosophy. Now we need to understand the difference between ethics and law. Generally, in the Islamic perspective, what is ethical is also legal. In other words, if something is moral, it is halal. If something is immoral, it is haram. In other legal systems, this may not be the case. There are some immoral things that are not illegal, just as there could be some legal things that may be considered immoral. But in the Islamic system, morality and legality are perfectly matched. Where do we get ethics? Where do we derive our ethics? Be they general ethics or bioethics. Ethics generally reflect the worldly view of a society or a community. For example, Muslims are a community. They are a religion, a world religion. They therefore have got their ethical values. So the source of ethics for Muslims is going to be Islam and the revelations of Islam, the Quran and Sunnah. Christians also may have their Christian ethics derived from their religion. Jews also can have Jewish ethics derived from their Jewish religion and background. Similarly, there are some secular people who also have secular ethics. In other words, ethics reflects your worldview, your philosophy of life. What do you expect? What do you understand to be right and to be wrong? Therefore, for Muslims, the source of ethics is the Sharia, which is the law of Islam. In the Sharia, there are two aspects that we can use as sources of our ethics, specific sources of ethics. The first one is what we call purposes of the law. General purposes of the law, maqasid sharia. There are 5 of them, and these general purposes will define for us what is moral and what's immoral, what is ethical and what is unethical in medical practice. We also have got what we call principles of the law, qawaid al-fiqh. These are also 5. They also help us in telling what is right and what's wrong, what can be done and what cannot be done in medical practice. I will now go into details about the maqasid and about the qawaid. As I said before, there are 5 maqasid, there are 5 purposes of the law, maqasid sharia. The first one is hifdh ad-din, protection of religion, protection of morality. This is the most important one. We cannot do anything that's against the religion, whatever its advantages may be. The second purpose of the Sharia is hifdh an-nafs, protection of life. This is the purpose of the law that covers most of what we do in medicine. The purpose is to protect life and to protect good health. Let me emphasize that in our world view, there is nothing that a doctor can do to make life shorter or make it longer, because the lifespan is qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is Allah's taqdeer. He's the one who determines when someone will die and when someone will live. So the purpose of medical practice from our perspective is quality of life. We'll treat patients, use the most advanced technology available to enable them have the highest quality of life until the moment of death, because we cannot change the moment of death. That is qadar. It's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third purpose of the sharia is hifdh al-nasl, protection of progeny. Progeny refers to reproduction, bring up children so that they can be the next generation of the community. It's very necessary, because once we do not maintain reproduction, the community will end in one generation. So hifdh al-nasl is achieved by obstetricians taking care of women before delivery and during delivery. It's achieved by pediatricians taking care of children to make sure that from the moment of delivery until they grow up, they are well taken care of and they are in good health. So that is the third purpose of the Sharia, hifdh al-nasl. The fourth purpose is hifdh al-aql, protection and preservation of the mind, of the human intellect. Humans are different from other creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that they have got a great intellect. When this intellect is impaired, then they lose their full humanity. So when psychologists and psychiatrists deal with problems of anxiety, problems of psychosis, problems of other neuroses that people may suffer from, when they deal with problems of stress, they are trying to preserve the human intellect and the human mind, which is the fourth purpose of the Sharia. The fifth purpose of the Sharia is hifdh al-mal, preservation of resources. Now, as we practice medicine, we have to be careful not to waste resources. These are valuable resources, we should not waste them. But there is another perspective in which this purpose of the law is achieved by medical practice. The wealth of any country, the economy of any country, any community, depends on the number of healthy people who are working to support the economy. Medical care, by keeping the citizens healthy and employable and working, contributes to generating wealth for the community. So medicine contributes to this also through the economic framework. So those are the 5 purposes of the Sharia. Let me repeat for emphasis. The first one is hifdh al-din, protection of religion or deen or morality. The second one is hifdh al-nafs, protection of life and health. The third one is hifdh al-nasl, protection of progeny, which means with delivery and child care. The fourth one is protection of the mind, of the human intellect, is hifdh al-aql. And the fifth one is hifdh al-mal, protection of the resources, financial and other material or human resources of the community. Now, how do we apply this? When we take a patient to the ICU, the intensive care unit, we do all what we can. We are fulfilling the preservation of health and good health. That is the second purpose of the Sharia. But sometimes the patient may be in the ICU for very long and it may be a futile case. So continuing to keep the patient in the ICU may be interfering with preservation or protection of resources. So when we have any specific condition, we need to look at all the purposes of the law together and find the right balance between them. In addition to the maqasid sharia, we have got 5 qawa'id al-fiqh, 5 principles of the law, and these also help to guide our ethical reasoning and our ethical ethical decision making, especially when we are facing ethical dilemmas. The 5 principles are: the first one is qa'idatul qasd, the principle of intention. What this principle says is that our acts are judged by the underlying intentions that we have got in our heart. As a medical practitioner, you want to make sure that your inner intentions are moral and are right, because you are the only one who knows what these intentions are. The people outside may not know what these intentions are. If the intentions are bad, sometimes you will commit errors, malpractice, and they could see. But there are situations in which they may not see. So the real guardian of this principle is yourself, to make sure that you follow your inner conscience, to make sure that what you do is right all the time, whether someone sees you or they do not see you. It's the inner control to make sure that you practice ethical medicine. The second principle is called qa'idatul yaqeen, the principle of certainty. This principle says that we cannot take action without evidence. This is actually the basis of evidence-based medicine. We cannot take action based on doubt, based on shak. We must take action based on proper evidence, which includes taking a history, examining the patient, and doing the laboratory and radiological and other investigations that can guide us to what is the correct diagnosis and then what's the correct treatment or procedure to be carried out. Sometimes we may have a patient terminal and on life support. We need to make a decision. It's a very difficult decision. Should we continue artificial life support or should we stop it? Here we need to apply the principle of certainty, qa'idatul yaqeen. We need to do the tests, clinical tests, and maybe laboratory and radiological tests that are necessary, are relevant to establish whether there is brainstem death or not, because the ulama have established that brainstem death is legal death. So when we take measures to get the evidence, to get the facts, then we can make a decision in this matter of withdrawing or continuing life support. But this is evidence-based, it's based on facts. The third principle that we use in ethical reasoning is the principle of injury, qa'idatul dharar. This is a great principle. It means that before we make a decision in undertaking a medical procedure, we need to consider the benefits, al-masalih, against the injuries or side effects, al-mafasid. If the benefits are more than the injury or side effects that will be produced by our procedure, then it is ethical to go ahead. If the side effects or injuries are more, we do not go ahead. If the two are equal, it's better not to go ahead, because it's a principle of the Sharia that dar'ul mafsada muqaddamun ala jalb al-maslaha. Preventing harm has priority of consideration over accruing a benefit. So if in our mind undertaking a surgical procedure is 50-50, harm 50%, benefits 50%, it's better to be conservative and not to go ahead. I will later on talk more about this principle of injury, qa'idatul dharar, because it is used a lot in our medical practice. The fourth principle that we use is قاعدة المشقة, the principle of difficulty. The Sharia says when we are in a difficulty, we are allowed to do things that are not normally allowed in order to save life. For example, if there is no medicine from what are considered halal sources, and the only one available is from a source that is not so halal, and life is at stake, we are allowed to use it. So this principle makes the practice of medicine very flexible and not very rigid. The fifth principle that we use is the principle of custom or precedent, قاعدة العرف. This says that a Muslim medical practitioner must follow the existing guidelines, standard operating procedures in carrying out their job, in carrying out any procedure, and not act erratically according to whims. We need to follow the established principles that are accepted by all the practitioners in the profession. Now I want to go back and talk more about the principle of darar, the principle of injury. As I said before, in this principle, we weigh the benefit and the injury. If the benefit is more than the injury, we go ahead with the procedure. This principle also helps us solve situations. Suppose you are faced with a choice, an ethical dilemma. You have got a disease and you've got an intervention. Either of them is going to cause injury. Which of them do you choose? The Sharia tells us that we choose ahwan al-sharrain. You choose the lesser of the two evils. You choose the lesser, the choice, the procedure, the approach that produces the least harm. There are also ethical principles used in the Western world. There are 4 of them, and these 4 principles, all of them fit only within one of the Islamic principles. The 4 principles are the principle of autonomy, which says that it is the patient who must make decisions. We cannot operate on a patient or carry out any procedure until the patient has agreed, has consented. This consent must be what we call informed consent. It must be based on explaining to the patient what you are going to do, how will you do it, what are its benefits, what are its side effects, and what are the alternatives, and making it clear to the patient that he or she is free to agree or consent, and that if the patient does not consent, there are no consequences. You are not going to be angry with them. You are not going to put them into any inconvenience. So they feel completely free in making their decisions. So this principle of autonomy is actually under the principle of injury, qaidatul darar. Because why is it the patient who must make a decision? Because it is the patient who has his or her interest best at heart. Nobody can hurt themselves deliberately. Other people could hurt others. So by putting the authority to consent in the hands of the patient, we are taking measures to make sure that we prevent injury. In the Western ethical framework, there is the principle of beneficence, which is benefit, and then there is the principle of non-maleficence, which means do not do harm. This, as I already explained, in the principle of injury in the Islamic system, we always weigh these two. Then there is the principle of justice, which again has to do with preventing injury. So you can see that one principle from the Islamic system covers all the 4 ethical principles that are generally used in the Western world, which means that the Islamic ethical system is much wider, has got a wider scope, and has wider applications. There are other issues that arise again from the principle of injury, قاعدة الضرر. The issue of confidentiality and privacy. These two terms are sometimes misunderstood, privacy and confidentiality. Let us explain. Privacy means that there is an area around the patient that's private. You cannot go into the privacy of the patient without their permission. You therefore cannot ask them questions if they do not want to be asked questions. You cannot physically examine them if they do not want to be examined. But after examining the patient, you find out their secrets, their confidence. After going into this privacy with permission, any information you get, you must keep it confidential. You cannot disclose it to anybody else without the permission of the patient. The only exception is we disclose that information to other healthcare practitioners who are taking care of that patient because they need to know what is going on. Otherwise, they will make mistakes when they are dealing with the patient. But we do not disclose this information to relatives or to other third parties unless the patient has given us consent to release the information. Also, under this principle of dharar is the issue of disclosure. We need to be open and transparent with the patients in telling them about their diagnosis and their prognosis, because they are the ones who will be making the final decisions on what treatment that they need to have. If they are not given full disclosure, they cannot make proper decisions. Disclosure also depends on the patient's desire. Sometimes the patient may want to know some of the information and not all the information. So we'll disclose to them as much as they want to know and do not disclose what they not want to know or what they are not interested in. I would like to discuss with you a contemporary ethical issue that we are facing. Medical technology or biotechnology has come up with a new technology called gene editing. There is technology now that can enable us to go into the genome and identify genes that are associated with the disease or susceptibility to disease, remove them and replace them with new genes. This is a great development in gene therapy. Before, gene therapy was not targeted. They could inject genes in a cell, but they were not sure where it would go and problems could occur. But with this new technology, we can target the replacement of a specific diseased gene or a specific gene that is associated with susceptibility to disease. This is a great technology. It has been tried out in plants and maybe in animals. It has been tried out in vitro. Now the question is, shall we use this technology on humans? There are many ethical issues that arise because this technology has got benefits. It has also got side effects. One of them is what we call off-target. You may want to go into a genome and splice away a bad gene, but you could splice a good gene. So before we make decisions on using this technology in treating human disease, we need to weigh carefully the benefits and the harms that could arise from it. The technology could be used on somatic cells, but also could be used on germinal cells. Now the problem is that if you use it on somatic cells, if there is a side effect, it's limited to the cells existing. If you use it in germinal cells that are involved in reproduction, and there is an error, there is a side effect, there is a disarrangement of the gene, of the genome, that defect will be carried on to the next generation and the generation after. That is why most people say that we can do this on somatic cells but do not approach any germinal cells at all because of the cross-generational impact of this. There is also the issue, why do we do gene editing? Do we do it to treat disease, or do we do it in order to get better traits for people? Again, when we weigh the benefits and harms, we realize that if we use it to treat disease, it makes sense because the benefit there is very clear. We can risk the side effects. But we cannot do it if someone just wants to change their height. They want to change their color. They want to change their eyes. They want to look better. They want to look more beautiful. We cannot use this technology because in that case, the harm, the side effects are much more than the benefits that are being considered in this technology. So, medical ethics from the Islamic perspective is a real discipline, is growing, it's expanding, it's trying to catch up with the new developments in medical technology. We need to have answers to all the new issues that come up. And when a new issue comes up, we go back to Maqasid Sharia. We go back to the 5 purposes of the Sharia and use them to analyze the issue. We go back to the 5 principles of the law, Qawa'id al-Fiqh, and use them to analyze the issue, and then we can get to the solution. I would like to leave you with a challenge. We require as many as possible of our young physicians to take up interest in the area of medical ethics from the Islamic point of view. We need to develop the principles that I have told you and develop their applications. We need to do research. We need to write many books. There is a great book called Majallat al-Ahkam al-Adliya. It was written in the 19th century by the Ottomani Empire or Ottomani dynasty. It is a great book because it applies the principles of fiqh to the area of business and commercial transactions. I think we need to develop a similar book that applies principles of fiqh, Qawa'id al-Fiqh, in the area of medical practice. And it will not be one book because medicine keeps on growing. This means that every year as medical technology comes up with the new challenges, new ethical dilemmas, we need to expand the book more and more. So we need people to concentrate on this area. We need some people to focus on this area of research. Inshallah, what they produce will be very useful for the Ummah and will be very useful for the rest of humanity. Thank you very much for listening to me. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.